Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode on RAM Media. Today I'm going to be discussing human personality traits, and this is going to be my introduction to the psychological meditation on my channel, how the impact that Christianity has on the mind, what does it say about the human psyche, and I'm going to try bring as much research and stuff like that as possible. And I'm doing an introduction specifically on personality trait today as an introduction, because in my other videos I'm going to refer to this quite a lot because I've found it extremely helpful. So if this intrigues you at all, stay tuned. Right, so to get started, so what I'm going to be talking about today specifically is what is known as personality trait theory, and I'm going to be referring to what's known as the Big Five personality traits. And the Big Five personality traits, each one of them breaks down into subcategories of categories of two. So, for example, if we have a look at extroversion, extroversion breaks down into two subcategories, which are assertiveness and enthusiasm. And we're going to go through what all of this actually has to say to us. And like I said, I found this to be incredibly useful, not only in my own personal life, but in one of my other videos, I mentioned that I've how can I say, in an involuntary way, become somewhat of a counselor. And anyone who has worked in the Christian, who is a Christian and has worked in the Christian faith at all, and has moved, for want of a better word, moved up the ranks into a leadership position, whether you are a youth leader, whether you are a pastor or an elder, whatever the case might be, you'll find that you always end up playing counselor to people. And it's I think it's one of those inevitable parts of being a leader in any a realm whatsoever, that you're going to have. If people see that here's someone who's maybe moderately competent in whatever the case might be, and they're supposed to be leading us, then maybe if we have a word with them about stuff, then maybe they can point us in the right direction. And so I found myself in a position where I always tell people, listen, I'm not qualified, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but people they come to me anyway. And I guess it's just people are desperate for someone to just talk to them and listen and give halfway decent, unbiased advice. And it goes to show how much people can benefit from just, if we could just care a little bit more and listen a bit more to each other in general. So what I've done is, because I found that I had this responsibility, is that I thought, well, if I'm going to do this at all, I need to make sure that I know what on earth I'm talking about. And I've gotten to the point now where I will not actually, so let's say I start to say, right, you can start coming every Monday. On the first Monday, the first thing I'll do is I'll give the person, I'll tell them to go and do a trait test, a personality trait test. That's the very first thing I will do. And it helps us understand some of these things. And I found it to be just so helpful, I cannot even tell you. Couples have come for like marriage counseling and things of that sort, and once they do the traits and they have a look at their traits and they see each other's traits, well, it's almost like this light bulb goes on in their head. Oh, well, that's why they're like that. They're not just being obnoxious, you know. They're really like that. And the benefit has been so powerful that it would I would be wrong to not actually introduce this to you. Now, all of my resources, all of my links and things like that, I'm going to put into the comments section so that you can go have a look at the papers and all of the information yourself. And I emphasize and I stress, go look at it yourself, get an understanding of yourself, because I'm just going to go through it in a very basic way today. Nowhere like exhaustive as it should be, and we need to understand that all of this research it's ongoing, it's constantly ongoing and being refined and all of that sort of thing, and that's where we are. And I believe this would help absolutely anyone. because a lot of the times we always ask, why do we do the things we do? Why are we inclined certain ways? And I believe that this really gets down to helping us have a sort of a more formalized way of understanding things. So here we go. Now, what is human personality sort of basically defined in this particular regard? It's basically how you perceive and you interact with, not only with your environment but with other people as well. And that's it. Your personality. And you'll find that, for example, take a parent. Parents, as soon as when your child is born, they're like few days old or a week old, whatever, and you can see there's already, and if you've had more than one child, they're immediately from that most basic point, they're already different. How and they respond differently. Some sleep and they're absolute gem. Others do nothing but cry all the time. And this all really comes down to our personality traits and how they affect us, and like we say, how we perceive things. So, for example, someone who's high in neuroticism it's very easy to make them afraid or make them feel victimized, because they see a person who is very, very high in neuroticism, they immediately perceive the world as a place of threats, and will feel very easily victimized by things, even if it's not intended, but that's how they interpret the world. And it's almost like an interpretive, how humans, it's our interpretive framework of the things that we're put up against. And so this brings in a lot of insight for that. So as I said, we've got five factors. For those of you that are wondering why I keep looking off camera, it's because that's all of my information is. I don't have the fancy teleprompters and things of that sort. So bear with me. My channel's evolving. So we have 5 factors and 10 aspects, as I said, and we're going to go through all of them. How this research was conducted. I mean, it's really good research. Is one thing that people realize is that all of the different human idiosyncrasies, let's say, they found that they were actually, that if you looked at the human language, it doesn't matter the language. This was obviously done in English first, because that's where a lot of the research took place, is in English-speaking country, and they found that everything has been codified in the language already, though because language does evolve, and changes over time, and we see things and we give words to things that we perceive in behaviors of other people. And so they did something that's what's called a factor analysis, which is a little bit, I'm not going to get into that. So they took all the words and found what correlates to what, and they sort of narrowed it down to get words that encompass sort of a body of behavior, for example. So, and it's actually fairly straightforward. It's quite easy to explain. So, for example, if you take the personality trait of openness, I mean, it's self-explanatory, really. It's like, so, and we know you talk about people who are very open-minded or people who are very narrow-minded. I mean, immediately. So you can see that these words are already coded in the human language. We just need to go in there and sort of understand what's going on, and if these words describe something real. And so open-minded, narrow-minded. So someone who's open-minded, they like philosophy, they can abstract reasoning, they're very creative. And then someone who's narrow-minded, someone who's then obviously the opposite of that, is very difficult to make them see a different perspective, and all of these kinds of things. So it's all once you get to understand what it's all about, it's all fairly intuitive. It's easy to understand. And which is why it's so helpful, because obviously something that's completely ridiculously complicated, or there'll be a limit to how effective it can be for the average person. And the average person is the average person. I mean, the vast majority, we're all average people, and laymen in certain ways. And it really lends itself to the average person on the street, this trait theory. So that's what they did. And then one thing that they also discovered is they took the once they had the theory sort of nailed down in English and all that sort of thing, they actually took it to a whole bunch of other countries to see, well, does this translate across countries, across cultures? And they found that it did. So if you go through the same process in like the Chinese language or the Zulu language or the Portuguese language, whatever the case might be, and you narrow everything down, they find that it's all very, very, very consistent across cultures. So this is not something that is arbitrary. It's not something that's culture or race specific or anything, or gender specific or any of these kinds of things. If I'm not mistaken, the research was done across 25 or 20, off the top of my head, 25 or 29 different countries, all kinds of cultures, all kinds of so economic status, levels, hierarchies, for want of a better word, and they found it is very, 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 very consistent. And the only difference is really that they found between cultures is how much they were expressed. So, for example, if you take the personality trait of agreeableness, they find that agreeableness is something that generally they found that women tend to be more agreeable than men, and across culture, it tends to be the same, that women are more agreeable than men, no matter what culture or what country you go to. But how much of a difference in terms of how many women versus how many men generally in terms of the agreeables varied across cultures. So, for example, one thing they found that personality traits that have the greatest sort of gender specificity, they found that the more egalitarian a country is, that means the more freedom of expression, the more equal opportunity and all of that sort of thing. So basically, the fewer barriers there are, so that people can go out and do whatever they want in whatever way they deem fit. They found in those countries, the traits between the genders were actually maximized. So, contrary to what a lot of people believe, that gender and all this is socially constrained and all of these things, they found that as soon as you open up the floodgates, women are going to be women and men are going to be men. Who would have thunk? And that in the more conservative, so for example, if you go to the Middle East, for example, where women tend to have a lot less freedoms than what they do in the West, or any country where it's got a lot more of that sort of traditional way which people think are oppressive, and where women are and men, they really, really strict on the gender roles, you find that then that the gap between the gender expressions or how the personality traits divide is actually minimized quite a lot. So so for those people that actually want to make the gap, your social constructionists and your social justice warriors, if contrary to what they would prefer, if you want to minimize the gap between genders, you actually need to be you need a more conservative society rather than an egalitarian one, which is just so it completely contradicts everything they said, which goes to show that your social that society, what they say, everything is always socially constrained, it's not really. Society responds to the biology rather than the other way around, and contrary to what a lot of people today and your postmodernists and all these people would have you believe. Now, there's an argument that that the traits are we often argue nature versus nurture. Is it biologically set, or is it socially set? And what they're beginning to find, what appears to be the most likely, is that we are born with our personality traits already in place. And a lot of parents, you can just ask any parents, they say as soon as the kids are born, it's the interesting thing, even if you breed animals, right? Even if you breed animals, my brother-in-law and my sister, they used to breed Alsatians, and even in a little litter of little Alsatian puppies, you could see they're not all the same, right? Some are more adventurous, some are a bit more fearful, some are a bit more playful, some are a bit more aggressive. So, and you find the same thing, you find the exact same thing in humans. When in children, it's like already from there, when they're at their most pure and unadulterated, these differences are already there, and you've had nothing to do about it. So that's what seems to be the case, that these things you're set. You're not a blank slate when you are born. That there's been this idea for a very, very long time that when we're born we are a blank slate. That is it seems to be completely false. However, how you manage and deal with these traits, it can be refined through upbringing. So, for example, if you are disagreeable as a child, you can learn to be more agreeable through your parents discipline you. Share. Don't smash your siblings over the head with a truck more than you have to. Things of that sort. And you find that through discipline and all of these kinds of things that we can refine, but we're always going to have those proclivities. And our upbringing can only serves to mitigate and direct these things in constructive ways. And so that is that about the nature versus nurture part of it. So I've spoken about. Oh wow, I've gone through all of it already. Here's an interesting thing. As you age, your personality traits do change over time. For example, as you age, you will become less extrovert, which prefer to stay at home a little bit. You're less social. So it explains why when you're in your 20s you like to go out and party and rave and do whatever the case might be, but you come away from that as you get older, which it makes sense. This is something we see, and as you get older you become less neurotic. You tend to be a little bit more chilled and all of these sorts of things, which is true. And you become a lot less open to experience, which is again also true. There's a phrase in the language which is they're set in their ways. Is how we describe it. However, your agreeableness goes up and your conscientious goes up. So you find that as people age, they tend. So in terms of the conscientiousness going up, as people age, they tend to be a lot more concerned with being honest and ethics and all of that kind of thing. And they also tend to be a little bit more agreeable, which is nice. Which is why you like to have your grandparents around, or your parents around for your grandchildren. They're more agreeable. Play with them around a lot. And they're more conscientious. So that it's why when we look at the Bible and it says honor your father and mother and respect your elders, the elders are going to be a lot more concerned with ethics and what's right and wrong than young people are. When you're young, whatever goes, man, whatever works. And so it's really, really good to have old people around, and we suffer a loss by not having that. So let's begin. I'm going to start off with a personality trait known as extroversion, and we've all heard about, if a person is extrovert, most of you already have a good understanding. So, just a brief description. Extroversion is characterized by excitability, sociability, talkativeness, assertiveness, and high amounts of emotional expressiveness. So, for example, if you look at me, I'm here on YouTube putting myself out there. I'm very talkative. Anyone that knows me, I'm very talkative, and on all these kinds of things. You would be 100% accurate in assuming that, hey, this guy, he must be an extrovert, and that is true. Now, I'm not a huge extrovert. I score only in the 65th percentile. So one thing we need to understand, when you do a personality score, you score anything from between 0 and 100 on every single trait. So every single person, if you go into a personality trait test, you will be somewhere along the line on every single personality trait, right? You will score between 0 to the 100th percentile, somewhere along there, and then that will determine on how strongly expressed that trait is, and then each trait affects each other. They play along with each other. So, for example, someone who is highly agreeable, or let's say highly extrovert, right, will want to be very social and all of that sort of thing. If they're very high in extroversion, they like to go out and see people. But if they're also very, very high in neuroticism, they will have a bit of a conflict there where they want to go out and be social with people, but because they're so high in neuroticism, they're afraid of doing so. So there will be this inner conflict that they want to be social, but they're too afraid to actually put themselves out there in order to be social, and there will be that inner conflict. Whereas if they're then very, very low in neuroticism, they're the type of people, they can just walk up to anyone and just make friends, just like that. They don't care. If the world is just a place of potential friends, and so all of these things they play off each other, and so that's why you can never And that's why human beings are so different, because we're all between 0 to 100 on every single one of these things. And then you've got then another dimension of how, so you've got those dimensions. Then you've got the subcategories, which is the 10, where you will vary on those as well. And then you then have another dimension, because how do these all affect each other, and how do they play off each other, and how do they either maximize each other or contradict each other. So that's actually quite interesting. Very, very, very fascinating. I've been interested in psychology as far back as I can remember, really. And this is absolute. It's just brain candy for me to actually read all of the research and things. It's just helped me understand so much about not only myself, which is good. You know, it's like, oh, you know, I'm really good there, but yeah, I'm a bit of an idiot over there. Maybe I should fix that. Absolutely brilliant. So let's have a look. See here. We're going to start with extroversion. As I said, so people who are high. Sorry, I went off on a rant. So let me start again. Extroversion is characterized by excitability, sociability, talkativeness, assertiveness, and high amounts of emotional expressiveness. So for those of you, you know, I went off track. That's someone who's high in openness and low in conscientiousness. You'll understand just now. It's like I'm all over the place. Right. And emotional expressiveness. So there we go, right? People who are high in extroversion are outgoing and tend to gain energy. So they're energized by social situations. However, people who are low in extroversion, otherwise known as introverts, tend to be more reserved and have to use up energy in order to be social, right? Even though I am in the 65th percentile of which makes me an extrovert, I find that as far as social interactions go, I actually resonate a lot more with people who are introverted. As in, for me, it actually does take a degree of energy in order to be social. And but because I'm sort of I'm not excessively high in extroversion, I'm sort of, you know, in the middle. I'm moderately extrovert. So depending on the social interaction, being moderate, depending on how it is, it will either energize me or take a lot out of me. Whereas someone who's exceptionally high in extroversion is always energized, almost no matter how it goes. They're just, you know, they're always energized by social interaction. And someone who's very, very introvert, it's like no matter how good a social interaction is, no matter how beneficial, they will always be. It's like, oh my goodness, I need to go and sleep for 2 weeks in order to get over that social experience, even if it was a good one, right? So people who rate high on extroversion enjoy being the center of attention. They like to start conversations. They enjoy meeting new people. They have a wide social circle of friends and acquaintances. They find it easy to make new friends. They feel energized when they're around other people, and they generally say things before they think about them. That's me. Sometimes. No, a lot, actually. But people who rate low in extroversion tend to prefer solitude. They feel exhausted when they have to socialize a lot. They like what you call me time. I need me time. And the people who are low in that. They find it very difficult to start conversations. They dislike small talk. I resonate with that as well. But then again, remember, I'm sort of moderately extrovert at the 65th percentile, so that's moderately extrovert. And they carefully think about through things before they speak. And they dislike being the center of attention. So there's nothing worse that you could do to someone who's introverted, is like put them on the spot. They'll just want dig a hole and climb into it, and it's like, no, please ignore me. My wife is very, very low introvert, and it's so funny. She's exactly like this. Now, here's something we need to understand before we go on. No matter where you are, whether you're introvert or extrovert or whatever the case might be, and along these lines, every single one of these things is a legitimate way of being. Every single one. So we mustn't sit here, right, and think, well, it's better to be one way or it's better to rubbish. Okay? None is better. That they are all absolutely legitimate, and you need people of all stripes, as they say. Every single one of these things is a legitimate way of seeing the world, is a legitimate mode of existence, right? And as such, it means that we need all kinds of people in order to have the most, to get all of the views that in the world, all the perceptions. We need to talk to each other. It's why we need to talk to each other. It's why we need to understand to each other, and sort of that old saying, put yourself in other people's shoes, see how they see things, and so on and so forth, and you get a much richer toolkit for how to view the world if you can learn from the strengths of other people. But then again, even though every single one of these things is a legitimate way of being, at the same time, it can also be, if you rely on it too much, it can also be a weakness, right? So someone who's very, very extrovert and likes to talk, that whilst that's very good in some situations, in other situations it's not, because sometimes you just need to keep quiet. It's better to keep quiet. It's something I struggle with. It's like, getting me to talk is not a problem, but getting me to shut up, yeah, you've got a fight on your hands, which is terrible. I need to get that right. And between my missus and I, it's for example, it's been a problem with us where she's very introvert and I'm very talkative, and we've had to really, really negotiate conversations where I need to hold back and give her a chance, and for me to become know how to be a little bit less talkative, and her how to be a little bit more talkative and more assertive, because extroversion is also the assertiveness dimension. So if you break down into the two subcategories of extroversion, you have assertiveness and you have enthusiasm. Now here's the interesting thing. Whilst at the primary trait, let's say, which is extroversion, there's very, very little difference between the genders, right? You generally find that once you get to the subcategories, the two subcategories, assertiveness and enthusiasm, that tends to be then where the genders then diverge the most. So, for example, you will find that men who are extrovert tend to be quite a lot higher in assertiveness, because that's the assertiveness trait, and you find that a lot of women, especially when they go out into the business world, they go for what's called assertiveness training, and it really helps them. It really, really helps them a lot, because women tend to be quite agreeable, and as such, if they are extrovert and also very agreeable, they will struggle to assert themselves, because in the extroversion you've got assertiveness and enthusiasm. A woman who is highly extrovert tend to be lower in assertiveness and higher in enthusiasm. So which is that more cooperative. They like to go and participate. So it's if you ever want to organize something, women are the way, the way to go, because, hey, we'll go and we'll participate. And again, because women also tend to be higher in agreeableness, they like to cooperate. Like, yeah, we'll go and we'll participate, which is good, but in certain ways can, especially in the business world, it can be a bit of a hindrance. So, girls, ladies, go if you want to do so, and even men, if you find that you are low in assertiveness, go and do some assertiveness training. It will really, really benefit you, to help you how to negotiate on your own behalf out in the business world. So a lot of people, they like to blame, it's the patriarchy and it's a man's world and stuff like that. It's like, no, because if a man is low in assertiveness as well, and because you get it, men who are low in assertiveness, high in agreeableness, they will struggle in the workplace too. Right? So that's why these personality traits are so good to understand, because a lot of these myths that are propagated by social justice insanity and feminist insanity with patriarchy, this and that, it's like, no, if you find that there's a man, even men who are low in assertiveness and high in agreeableness, they struggle in the workplace too. Right? So it's not just women who struggle. It's just because women tend to be in a particular trait, express a certain trait more than men, it appears like that there's a disparity, for example, in the workplace. But it isn't really that it's because they are women. It's because of people are responding to the personality trait and not the gender, right? And we need to be very, very, very careful of that. So, for example, women even though there's less of them than there are men. But women who are high in assertiveness and low in agreeableness, they're very successful in the business world. So it has nothing to do with the gender. It's the only thing that it has to do with the gender is that you find that because it's biological and your gender really determines a lot about what's going on in biology, you'll find that generally speaking, your biological makeup, your gender makeup will mean that you tend to tilt a little bit more this way or a little bit more that way. So it's very, very important to figure out these things and to understand these things. And we'll realize that some of the stuff out there is just absolute rubbish, and it's not helping. And the only thing it's doing is it's dividing people unnecessarily. And if we could just realize these things, it would be very, very helpful. So going on to the next one, which is agreeableness, which I've talked a little bit about already. Agreeableness, this personality dimension includes attributes such as trust, means you are very trusting, altruism, kindness, affection, and other pro-social behaviors. People who are high in agreeableness tend to be more cooperative, while those low in this trait tend to be more competitive and even manipulative. So, for example, something that you hear from women all the time is like how if they come out of a bad relationship, they're like, oh, that manipulative dog, right? And this is actually why, right? Because if you are very high in agreeableness, you will tend to be more trusting than you probably should be, which then so a lot of people have, and you get a lot of outrage, but if you say something like, it's easier to deceive women, and people are like, oh, are you saying women are stupid? It's not because women are stupid, not, because if you look at IQ, men and women are the same. There's not much of a difference in between intelligence. Women are really, really smart too, but women are more inclined to be very, very trusting, even at the cost, even at a risk to themselves, right? Whereas men, being lower in agreeableness, they're more disagreeable. They're a lot more out for themselves, and this is why you get and are manipulative, and that's why you tend to find these differences there that and which can do us in. And again, we need to understand that anyone who is high in agreeableness will generally be easy to manipulate, because they can be very, very trusting and they want to cooperate and stuff. So if you want to be in a situation of negotiating power, being high in agreeableness is not going to do you very well. You want to be as disagreeable as possible to negotiate on your own behalf, because you're out for yourself. And so being disagreeable is actually a high predictor of success in the business world, and anyone who follows the social rhetoric will see that this causes a lot of problems. But again, they say, oh, there's this glass ceiling there with women because women can't succeed. It's not a glass ceiling, because women who are disagreeable are very successful in the workplace, very, very successful in the workplace. But the only difference is, generally speaking, women are a lot more agreeable than men. So, for example, just to get an idea of the kind of difference, if you had to take random pairs of men and women, so here's a man and here's a woman, place a bet, right? Place a bet on which one is more agreeable. If you chose the woman, you would be right 60% of the time, right? So it's not an absolutely huge difference, right? But it's significant enough to cause to cause a social effect that is quite noticeable, to the point where anyone who wants to be dishonest or who wants to assess the situation in a very shallow way would find themselves saying, oh, it's patriarchy and it's against women. It's not, because men who are high in agreeableness are not particularly struggle in the same way that women do in the workplace. And women who are low in agreeableness, right, they succeed just as much as men who are low in agreeableness do in the workplace. So again, the society is responding to the personality trait and not the gender, right? So we really, really got to understand that, right? I was again red-pilled, woken up to this fact, because again, because I'm very, very I'm high in openness, so I tend to be egalitarian as well. And I'm also, even though I'm low in agreeableness, but I tend to be. I've always had a very egalitarian view in life, and I always thought, we should remove obstacles and things of that sort. And then this learning all of these things helped me to adjust my view quite a lot, that things are not that simple, and it's things are much more subtle than merely, oh, men are getting in the way, or women are this, or men are that. It's just, we really got to get this right. So in agreeableness, you have the two subcategories. You have compassion and politeness, and again, you generally find a bit of a divergence here. So even though agreeableness overall is one of the traits where you actually find quite a disparity between men and women. So extroversion, men and women are pretty much the same until you get to the traits. But in agreeableness, already at the primary trait, you already find that there's quite a bit of a difference over there. So for example, on average, women 60% of the time are more agreeable than their male counterparts. And so when you come down to compassion and politeness, so agreeableness breaks down into compassion and politeness. So if I take someone like myself, for example, in terms of agreeableness, I'm very low in agreeableness. I only score in about the 45th percentile of agreeableness, which is really, really low. However, at the subtrait, and this is one of the interesting things, even though I'm really, really low in agreeableness, I score very, very high in politeness. Right? And people who deal with me, I'm very, very polite, but then I'm very low in compassion, right? And it's something that my wife really, really taught me how to be more compassionate, because she changed me completely. I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for her. But and I think that, again, one of the things that men and women need to start getting along better is we help each other get better. We can't do without each other, but we're going to talk about that in other psychological things. So this is just a preface. But you do find, so for these interesting things where I'm very low in agreeableness, but very high in politeness, right? And this is also one of the things where your upbringing can really, really affect and ameliorate various things. Because as a kid growing up, man, I was a disagreeable little schmuck, let me tell you. And I hurt a lot of people. I did a lot of really, really bad things and stuff like that. And it wasn't until meeting my wife that I realized, and even slightly before, I was like, I can't carry on like this, because I'm hurting myself in the process as well. And then meeting my wife, she was just the spirit of change that I needed to be more compassionate and to really understand why it was so necessary. So men and women, we need each other, man. You can't do without the other. It's ridiculous, and it proves what the Bible says as well. We need each other. Men are poor substitutes for women, and women are poor substitutes for men. You can't have it. We can't do what the other one does. It's rubbish. So I would be really, really high in politeness, and you can have someone who is who's high in agreeableness, high in compassion, but low in politeness. You get all kinds of different things. And you can have people who are very high in politeness and very high in compassion. And again, these are it can be a strength and it can be a weakness. So it's a strength. Compassion is obviously a strength, right? You want to have it's the ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes and feel what they're feeling and sympathizing with them, and it's a good thing. It's our medical industry should not that it necessarily is pharmaceuticals and all their corruption, that's what social cooperation, help the needy, help the suffering, help the widow and children who are being abused. That's what compassion is there for, right? And again, politeness. So even if you are low in compassion, politeness is still a good thing, because even if you don't really care about people, you should at least be polite, and you have a what you call the social convention of, let's at least be decent to each other, even if we don't particularly care about each other, so that life isn't more miserable than it absolutely has to be. And so these are strengths, to be polite and to be compassionate. But it can also be a weakness, because compassion can be abused, right? And this is what a lot of the social justice actually does, where they prey on people's compassions in order to get them to follow a social rhetoric with a political agenda that ends up harming people more than it actually benefits them. And the reason why people don't see that is because they're so compassionate. So if you say environmentalism has become completely corrupt, then people are like, oh, don't you care about the environment? Well, it's like, no. I care about the environment, but I have a bone to pick with the political agenda that's attached to it, and that cannot be separated from it. And so you get into a huge problem there. And the vast majority, if not all, social activism today is nothing but preying on the agreeableness and compassion of people, and using it as a weapon in society, and using it as a tool to bring about social changes that are not actually in the best interest of those who they claim to be interested in. This is just so malicious. It's unbelievable, to manipulate someone's decency for a nefarious end. There are very few things more reprehensible than that, and it's being done everywhere today. So people who are high in this trait of agreeableness, they tend to have a great deal of interest in other people. They care about other people. They feel empathy and concern for other people. They enjoy helping and contributing to the happiness of others. And those who are low in this trait tend to take very little interest in others. They don't care about how other people feel, and they have very little interest in other people's problems, and they tend to insult and belittle others. Now, again, both high agreeableness and low agreeableness have their benefits and things like that. So, for example, I've just spoken about being compassionate is a good thing, but how it can also be abused. And even being disagreeable. Being disagreeable is a good thing, but it can also be abused. So if you're disagreeable, you're not easily taken for a fool, right? You tend to be very, very skeptical. When someone is offering you something, you're like, well, hang on, are you trying to sell me snake oil here, or what are you exactly trying to do? So in that way, being someone who's disagreeable, you're very critical, you don't just buy into whatever people are telling you. Your emotions are not very easily manipulated at all. And these are and you're very, very good at negotiating for yourself. And these are all very, very good things. But at the same time, right, if you're too disagreeable, then you're cold, you're uncaring, you're manipulative, you can be a bit of a psychopath, basically. And you'll find that, people who are psychopathic, very, very low in agreeableness, they could not care at all. They feel nothing. That's like, well, sociopaths, I forget which one correctly it is off the top. I always get the two mixed up, good grief. But that's just the jumble in my head. To thank for that. And so that's what you find. So there are the strengths and weaknesses, and it's about how in life they're all legitimate. It's when the Bible says lean not on your own understanding. It's not saying accept blindly. The Bible understands that we all have our personality traits, and when you lean exclusively on your own perception of the world, then you're inclined to go to the extreme end of your personality trait and end up using what was a strength, and it becomes a weakness, and you actually end up hurting other people. So when it's saying lean not on your own understanding, it's not never understand or never learn or never study. It's like, be careful of your biases, right? Be careful of your biases. Even though in certain circumstances the way you are is very, very good, in other circumstances the way you are is wrong, is not going to get you very far, and you need to learn how to adapt and allow other people's inputs in certain things. And that's what it's actually talking about. It's not saying, don't understand anything at all, right? So, And here's the interesting thing as well. People who are disagreeable, because a lot of people are like, oh, my emotions, I'm so offended. And sometimes it's like, sometimes the way forward is to be like, okay, right, forget your emotions. Are you just going to suffer here now for the rest of your life, or are you going to get over it and actually fix the problem? And and that's again where the emotional side, it's valid, but being overly emotional all the time can actually how can I say, it can stagnate you. It can freeze you in time where, oh, I'm so overwhelmed by all these emotions, and can prevent you from doing what's necessary in order to fix the problem. And again, here you see the difference between men and women, right? Because woman, typical scenario, and if you're married, you'll know this. Even if you're not married and you're living with that's how it is these days. No one bothers getting married anymore. Where your missus will complain about something, and she'll complain endlessly about something, and she just wants to sit there quietly and just listen to it, and you're like dying to give her the solution to the problem. It's like, shut up, woman, and take my solution to your problem, right? And so the guy is irritated, and then the woman is sitting there and she's like, I just want to express myself, and you're such an uncaring Neanderthal. It's like, why don't you listen to me and just listen to me? Because once she's finished, she feels better, right? And it's like, but there's a negotiation that has to happen here, right? It's like, men, you need to get over yourself a little bit. Stop being so hyper rational, because this is the one of the problems between men and women. Men can make the error of being hyper rational to the point where they dismiss all emotional things as illegitimate and stupid. But then women can be overly emotional or hyper emotional, where everything is emotional, and then how can I say? They get to the point where they can't divorce themselves from their emotions, and everything is unemotional. Everything is a reason to cry. Everything is a reason to be offended about. And we see that there's this constant battle between men and women, and men need to learn, listen, emotions are legitimate, right? So when your wife comes home and she just wants to chinwag about her day, just let her, and just shut up for 5 minutes and let her, and even better, interact with her, right? So how does that make you feel? And and sympathize. That's really terrible. And be genuine. Don't pretend, because she's going to know straight away. Women know when you're being an idiot, right? They can tell, right? It's part of the compassion, right? Woman, you talk about that sixth sense that women have. That compassion lets women know, hey, I know exactly what you're all about. So either be genuine or get lost, right? So men have to understand that emotions are legitimate. And then women need to understand that, stop making your man suffer by having a problem that never ends, right? It's like, at some point, it's legitimate for a husband to get fed up with always hearing the same problem over and over again. It's like, for not only his sake, but for your sake, at some point, get to a point where you actually fix the problem. Then maybe you won't feel all of these horrible emotions all the time. You understand what I'm saying? So again, you got to have that negotiation. You got to have, not everything can be a pile of emotions, and not everything can just be cold, hard reason and logic, right? Well, you need both. They need to meet in the middle, and they need to negotiate, and there are appropriate, like the Bible says, there's a season for everything. There's a time for everything. At sometimes the emotional is the way to go, and sometimes the cold, rationalistic way is the way to go. And you have to do each thing at its appropriate time. And that's again a problem with this whole the feminism. And now you've got meninism. Men are doing the same stupid thing now as well. And you've got the MGTOW and stuff like that, where rather than men and women coming together in the middle and negotiating, they're just getting further and further apart and leaning on their own understanding. Like, our way is the only legitimate way of being. That's so stupid. It's like, no, right? Come to the middle, realize that both are legitimate, and negotiate, for heaven's sake. Otherwise, what, you want to fight forever? Is that what you want to do? Do you want the family unit to continue dissolving? Do you want the issues between men and women to just get worse? Is that what you want? So we got to get over ourselves, man, for sure. For sure. And let me tell you, as a man as a man who had to get over himself to be and learn to be more compassionate, because and it was tough. It was tough, man. It doesn't come naturally to me at all. But to learn to be more compassionate, more agreeable, and all of these qualities that my wife brought into my life has done me no end of good. And I'm not perfect. Hey, don't get me wrong. I'm not perfect, but it's done me no end of good. And my life is spectacular because of it. It's better than I could have ever imagined, ever. And it's vice versa. My wife says the same. She says the same thing, because she's like, wow, the learning how to be more logical and more objective and more rational has done her also no end of good. And because we sit and we negotiate these things, and man, I tell you, I would wish my marriage upon anyone, right? It's just, obviously we're not perfect. You're never going to find perfection anywhere, but we regularly have people come up to us, and I'm not trying to brag here or anything, but I'm just trying to express the legitimacy of the effect that my own personal testimony is like. This has worked for me. I'm not talking from just an abstract, this is just some faraway idea. This has worked for me. And we have people even coming up to us sometimes like, are you guys putting it on, or are you actually that happy? Do you actually work that well together? Just the other day, literally 2 days ago, my wife and I, we were at the shop. We did a couple of little groceries because we were going to make something for dinner, right? And we're sitting at the till, as one of the self-service tills, and we are popping, and we're having a conversation. And she's like, should we eat straight away, or should we eat a little bit later? And she's like, but I'm concerned that you're young. And I'm like, hey, no problem, love. We can eat a bit later if that's what you want. I understand that you have different requirements. And if I'm really hungry, well, I'll make myself a sandwich. And we're sitting there and we're negotiating what to eat without fighting. And there was this woman at the back of behind the till, in the assisted tills, and she's just looking at us, and she's like, listen, I'm so sorry that I'm eavesdropping here, but it's like, who are you? She's in absolute, and we're like, what? And she's like, if that was myself and my boyfriend, we would be fighting already, and all couples in the world have this experience, the never-ending fight on what's for dinner. And I know I've had it with other girlfriends as well, and it's just that lack of negotiation. It's like stop insisting that things have to be one way, and just realize and negotiate, and it just makes things so much better. And I looked at the girl and I'm like, well, why? It's like life is difficult enough. Why are we going to compound it? Why are we going to add to our issues by just insisting that our way is the only way? It's ridiculous. And we humans, we're just so narrow-minded in that particular way. Anyway, moving on, we have next what's called conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is standard features of this dimension include high levels of thoughtfulness with good impulse control and goal-directed behavior. Highly conscientious people tend to be organized and mindful of details. And conscientiousness breaks down into two sub-traits, industriousness and orderliness. And again, here's one of those things where men and women generally are about the same. They score about the same as far as the primary trait is concerned. So both men and women tend to be fairly the same as far as conscientiousness goes, but they diverge quite a bit in the subtraits. So let's quickly discuss conscientiousness, and then we'll get into the subtraits just now. So those who are high in conscientiousness, for example, they spend time preparing. So they plan things. They have their little calendars and the little file of facts thing. And on Tuesday I'm going to go for tea at this time, and they're very, that's what they're like. They tend to finish important tasks, so they don't procrastinate, right? People high in conscientiousness, they get the job done. If you're low in conscientiousness, you're a procrastinator. I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it later, and you end up never doing it. even though, good intentions, but you never do it, right? They pay attention to detail, very good attention to detail, and they enjoy having a schedule, right? So for them, hey, if every single second of the day could be planned for them, great. Whereas someone who's low in conscientiousness will be like, wow, they couldn't imagine something more restrictive and suffocating than that. It's like everything just scheduled all the time. It's like, no, I want my freedom, and so that, again, that's the difference between people who are high in conscientiousness, low conscientiousness. So people who are low in this trait, they dislike structure, they dislike schedules, they make a mess. They're generally messy. They don't really take care of things a lot. So you can tell someone is low in conscientiousness. If you look at their car, for example, they never wash their car. It's always, there's, the last week's McDonald's wrapping is in the corner there, and that it's a bit of a catastrophe. It's not because they don't care about the car or anything. So this is not because they don't care, right? This is not, it has nothing to do with because they care or no care. It's they're just people who are low in conscience. They're just bothered by mess less than someone who is high. It almost seems to be like, what is the threshold at which what is the point at which you begin to consider something is a mess and something is disorderly, and at what point does it begin to irritate you? And they also procrastinate, and again, they tend to fail to complete things that they're supposed to do. So here's the interest. Now, this can actually create a lot of conflict in a marriage. For example, so in the Bible, you have the instruction says, do not be unequally yoked, right? And we can get into that. But one of the interesting things is why, if you're going to get married, or if you're thinking about getting married, go and do a personality trait test with your wife or your husband or whoever, and get to know this. Because here's the interesting thing. One of the fights between men and women. Now, let me get into the subcategories. Conscientiousness breaks into industriousness and orderliness. Now, again, men tend to score higher in industriousness, right? Which is why, they work like mad and everything is about work all the time, right? And women tend to be higher in orderliness, which is why you have the never-ending battle. It's like, husband, dearest of mine, could you please put that shirt into the wash basket, right? It's not going to magically float there on its own. And you get there was this video, it floats around Facebook and stuff like that, of this guy where his wife starts complaining to him. It's like, you're leaving all these dishes and everything like that, and he's like, no, this is a magic table. If you just leave everything lying over there, then by the next day, by magic, it's just clean. And this woman is like, you dumbass. It's like, what's going on? And then he says like, well, but hang on, that's not all. And he goes through to the to the laundry room, and he's like, this basket is magic, because if you take all your dirty clothes and you put it in there, then the next day it's clean and it's folded up, and and this woman is like, you moron. And you can see it's like at that moment it's like he deserves a smack over the back of the head with a frying pan or something like that, and rightly deserved, because And so again, that's where we see where the even though generally speaking men and women score about the same in conscientiousness, when you get to the subtrait, industriousness and orderliness, it's like women tend to be, they like organizing stuff, right? And one of the complaints, I work I'm in engineering, and there's mostly men, and one thing that these men always complain about with their wife is like, my wife will not let me sit down for even 5 seconds. She finds something for me to do in the house. It's like she can't leave me alone to just watch the game. It's like, sweetie pie, can you please go and I don't know, oil the hinges? And it's like, and that's why. And again, when we talk about the social constructionists and these relativism, they're like, well, society influences what the gender roles. It's like, no. The reason why, it's the biology that dictates the roles. So why are women better at home and with the kids and all? Because they're more organized. I mean, the men are more likely to like lose the kid. It's like, so where's Johnny? I don't know.
he's on the roof bungee jumping kind of thing. It's like, no, that's wrong. Don't do that. And again, people think, because society is patriarchal, that's why it forces women into administrative roles. And it's like, no, women they like organizing stuff. That's why they choose those roles. It's like there's always this blame. We just blame people and completely forget about the fact that men and women are actually fundamentally different, right? We're different, right? And if you go back again, I'm not sure I spoke about this in another video, where the stereotype of a successful businessman, I think even today, but more so in sort of the 80s and the 90s and so forth, the stereotypical successful businessman was a guy who was always at work, to the neglect of his family, right? He couldn't make it to the football game. And if you've ever seen that movie Liar Liar by Jim Carrey, it portrays it exactly, where the little kid is, "Oh, Dad, will you make it for my birthday?" "Yes, I promise I'll be there for your birthday." And he ends up being distracted by something at work, doesn't pitch up, and the little kid is there all distraught. "Oh, Daddy lied." And it's actually a really funny movie. But that's what men were like, because that high industriousness, where all they do is work, or just that you just work all the time, to the detriment of your family, of your personal family life. And that's not good. That's not good. And here's the interesting thing. The strongest predictors of success in the business world are high conscientiousness, industriousness trait, low agreeableness. That is the highest. Those are the best predictors of success in the workplace. Well, guess what? Temperamentally, men are usually more disagreeable, and temperamentally, even though both men and women are high in conscientiousness, men are more industrious in general, which is why. Do you see men being highly successful in the workplace? That's why, right? And again, it's not so much of a gender issue. If it's not the society responding to the gender, it's society responding to the personality trait. Because if you have a woman who is also low in agreeableness and high in industriousness, she's just as successful as men are. She will earn the same salary. They're just as successful. So again, it's further evidence that it has nothing to do with patriarchy and rubbish like that. The society is responding to the traits. How hard do you work? How much time do you spend at work, right? They did a survey on physicians, and they found that male physicians were on average earning more than female ones. And then when they looked at the statistics, they found, well, no wonder, because the male physicians on average do 500 hours of overtime more than their female counterparts per year. Well, then it obviously makes sense. If you spend more time at work, you should earn more. So all of this business about gender wage gaps and how unfair, that's absolute trash. Because as soon as you pick out the individual choices that men and women make and the individuals make, you'll see a difference. But now here's the thing: if you go right and compare like for like, so men with other men who are high in agreeableness, low in conscientiousness, they're not successful either, right? They're not successful. And so there will be a wage gap there too. So men who are low in conscientiousness, high in agreeableness, versus men who are low in agreeableness and high in conscientiousness, there will be a wage gap there too, right? It's not because of patriarchy and we're keeping women in this glass ceiling rubbish. It's the individual differences in choices that people make. It's just one it's the differences in temperament that makes the difference. And the temperament, like we said earlier on, for the most part is set biologically. You're born this way. You're born with this temperament set, and because of your gender, you have the different hormones and things like that, and it will influence. And here's the thing, right? There is you often have the rhetoric in the world where it's like, well, they say, well, if you look at like the Fortune 500 or the FTSE 5 or the FTSE 100, there's only men. There's all these men over there. Patriarchy, how unfair, right? And they ask, well, why are there only men in those positions? That's the wrong question. That's a stupid question. It's the wrong question, and I tell you why. The right question, really, is why would anyone in their right minds be insane enough to want those jobs? Let me explain. To be that successful, you want to be the CEO of some company, flying around in a private jet, you've got your own 20 Ferraris and stuff like that. You have to work so much that you almost never get a chance to actually enjoy your success. It's that simple, right? When you talk about 70, 80, even 90-hour weeks, that's what it takes to be that successful, right? It means you have to focus on work to the exclusion of everything else in your life, right? And if you go and you look at those people who are in those positions of power, right? They're all divorced. They're estranged from their children. Their private family life is completely non-existent or highly dysfunctional, right? And so you have feminism that completely ignores this fact. It's like, no, women need to do it as well. And they're getting very frustrated because women not doing that. What is it? Because women are stupid? It's like, no, actually, it's because women are smarter, as far as I'm concerned, because women prioritize family life over work life. It's like their work life serves their private life, and that is the right way around. That's the right way around. So ladies, if you want a man who's going to be a good husband, you need to find a man who prioritizes, even if it means he's going to earn a little bit less and do less overtime and bring home a little less bacon, or lamb if you're kosher, right? You cannot, and you need to understand this. You cannot be a world-leading, absolutely successful businessman and be a wonderful father at the same time. You can't do it. You can't do it. And if you think you can do it, then it's because you have absolutely no idea, A, what it takes to raise children properly. They're not barn animals, right? They're not accessories, okay? Means you have absolutely no idea what it takes to raise children. And if you're that clueless, you probably shouldn't have children. And B, you have absolutely no idea what it takes to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and to be calling the shots and to be flying around in private jets. It's like, you know what? That is a classic case of the grass is greener on the other. It's not at all. Right? And so what women have basically done now is they have done nothing. And this is feminine's fault. I put this at the feet of feminism. Feminism has encouraged women to follow the bad example that men set. Right? So men chasing material things, they abandon the home, they abandon the children, they abandon their woman in order to go chase material things under the pretense that, oh, I'm doing it for the family. Because my children, I want to give them the best. It's like there is nothing better than there is nothing on the planet better than that you can give them other than yourself, your time as a father. And now what has feminism done? You've got in the modern times, women have done the exact same thing. They've abandoned their children at home to be looked after by nannies and maids or whatever the case might be, or pairs, to go and work. It's like that's wrong. That's the wrong way around. It's like, and they still have the temerity to complain, right? And these women still have the temerity to complain about the fact that they can't do both successfully. It's like, if men couldn't do it, what the hell makes you think that you are going to be able to do it? It's just completely and utterly ridiculous. So whenever you hear a woman lament the fact that she can't be a good businesswoman and a good mom at the same time, just tell her, say, sweetie pie, why don't you catch a reality check here? Men can't do it as well. You cannot be a decent father and a ridiculously decent father and a ridiculously decent businessman at the same time. Impossible. You cannot do it. End of story. You have to choose. And that's what life is all about. You can only serve one master. And that's where you go. Man, this stuff really helped clear things up for me. So you can't do it. And all of this social rhetoric these days is just utter rubbish, and it has done nothing but dissolve the family unit and made men and not only were men completely selfish, but it's just made women equally so. Women have become those who are subscribing to this social justice rhetoric. Women have become just as arrogant and narcissistic as the men that they hate. And it's like, if it was wrong for men to be that way, it is also wrong for women to be that way. And we need to get our heads out of the whatever orifice it is, and to start getting along better, and to start fixing up our families, and start putting the right priorities in life in place, because this is not going to go anywhere. Right. Then you have the neuroticism trait. Forgive my little rant there, but it really, these things need to be said. So we have the next trait, known as neuroticism. Excuse me, my eyes are a little bit itchy here. Oh, springtime is on its way. I get terrible allergies. Neuroticism is the next trait. Neuroticism or sensitivity to negative emotion. So neuroticism is a trait characterized by sadness, moodiness, emotional instability, and individuals who are high in this trait tend to experience mood swings, anxiety, irritability, and sadness. Those low in this trait tend to be more stable and emotionally resistant. So you have, and this breaks down in two aspects known as volatility and withdrawal. So withdrawal means people they withdraw into themselves, and they start isolating themselves. And volatility is like, you get those people who are they're happy 1 minute and then in absolute tears the next minute. And men, if you pay attention, go and speak to your wife, tell her what it's like when she's on her monthly cycle. At 1 minute everything's wonderful, and the next minute everything is, oh, it's so great, and they feel very manic. You should again stop being an idiot and try to understand how difficult and that is, and stop making women feel guilty for that. All right, that's not fun. It's not fun at all. And so why do I say this? Because again, this is one of those traits where women score higher than men do in neuroticism. It says here, individuals who are high in neuroticism tend to experience a lot of stress, worry about many different things, they get upset easily, they experience dramatic shifts in mood, and they feel very anxious. And those who are low in this trait are typically emotionally stable, they deal well with stress, they rarely feel sad or depressed, they don't worry very much, and they tend to be very relaxed. And again, this is why when we say that society responds to the biology, right, men tend to be they score lower in neuroticism, which is why men tend to be more successful in the workplace, because in the workplace they don't care about your feelings. All of the very, very high stress jobs, like your high powered lawyers, your high powered CEOs that are dealing, that they preside over the jobs of like thousands of people and things like that. Those are really, really, really high stress jobs, and men just cope better with those jobs. Men are biologically predisposed to just dealing with stress a lot better than women do. And this is just one of those things. It's why even before we were industrialized, who was the one that had to go out and hunt lions and hunt prey and beat off the lions and things like it? It was men, because they're just designed. So it's not because we forced men and women into various gender roles. No, it's because back in the day we just noticed, we happen to be kind of different. Why don't you go do that and I'll do this? Cool, yeah, fair enough. And off we went. And that's why society is the way it is. It's not the imposition of social constructs. It's just such arrogance to think that you can just, it's such relativistic arrogance to think that you can simply just manufacture an idea and impose that on society and believe that it's like the new age. Well, if I imagine it, it will become real. It's like reality cares about what you imagine. It's just such utter nonsense that you can just create reality like that. So, and that's essentially what people are saying, where they're saying, oh, it's just a social construct. It's like, you're kidding yourself if you think you can just make up a social construct, impose that on people, and that's just going to be it. It will just change things. It's absolute rubbish. You're gonna come face first against reality within about 5 seconds. So again, going back, I digressed. So neuroticism trait is sensitivity to negative emotions, and women score a lot higher than men do in this particular regard. And so for example, if let's say you are score very high, let's say you're like in the 99th percentile, there's almost no difference between you and someone who actually suffers from clinical depression. It will be it's hard on you, man. It's really devastating. This is something you don't want to be high in as much as possible, and it really is a problem. And men, in my opinion, and I did it too back in the day before my wife gave me a wake up call. It's we take for granted what this can really be like. It's devastating. And I mean, again, it's one of the things that causes that never-ending battle between men and women. Take like you've got a father and a mother, right? If father is playing with his child, it throws a kid up in the air, like 20 meters into the air, and the child is, hey, this is great, and mom is sitting over there like, what are you doing to my child? You're gonna kill my child, right? And so that's kind of that's like a humorous example of the difference between men and women, right? Well, women, they're sensitive to danger. People who are high neuroticism, they perceive the world through the lens of potential. Everything is a potential threat, and everything is potentially going to victimize me. And here's again the other interesting thing, right? It's these social justice warriors. They go out and they're like, I'm a victim. Who's the greatest? It's the victim Olympics, right? And everything is about safe spaces. Oh, I'm offended. Safe space, right? And it's like, and then in the same breath, out the other side of the corner of their mouth, they'll be like, there's no such thing as differences between gender. It's like, that's so ridiculous. It's like, whilst declaring that there is no difference between gender, they go out and they express their gender differences in the most stereotypical way imaginable. It's like, you're telling me, you're telling me there's no difference in gender, and you have all of these women running around, I'm so victimized, patriarchy. It's like, well, yeah, of course, get the government to come and protect me. It's like, I don't need a man, but if I'm an independent woman, but as soon as things don't go my way, let me bring in the government to come and force people to do what I want them to. It's ridiculous, man. But this neuroticism, it's terrible, and you need if you're high, and this is the thing, both men and women can be high in neuroticism. So again, don't get me wrong, this isn't just a female thing. You get men who are high neuroticism, you get women who are high neuroticism. It's just women on average score higher in neuroticism than women did, and it's with the same kind of degree as agreeableness. So we're roughly about, on average, there's a sort of a 60-40 or so percent difference between the two, so it's quite, I mean, there's this couple that I counsel. They are so atypical, it's unbelievable, where the guy, he's really agreeable but he's also really, really high in neuroticism, which is it's so weird. and he's low in conscientiousness, which irritates his missus quite, because she's high in conscientiousness, but she's so agreeable, she's so disagreeable. She's even more disagreeable than me. When I saw the results, I was like, wow, this is so. She's so unbelievably disagreeable. It's insane. But then she's also high neuroticism, which is, and oh man, the problems that these differences cause, and here's the interesting thing, for example, he's low in conscientiousness, but he's really, really agreeable. So it's like he doesn't really stick to he's a little bit messy. He doesn't really stick to what he says, and he's constantly, because he's so agreeable, he's constantly compromising for the sake of other people, even at the expense of his own relationship with his wife. And she's sort of sitting there, and she's really high in conscientiousness and high neuroticism. And she's like, well, he must be doing this because he doesn't love me. Because if he loved me, he wouldn't do that. He would focus more on me and tell everyone else to get lost. and I tried as I might. I couldn't really dislodge, because they both had their completely incorrect preconceptions of each other and why each other was doing things. And when I gave them this personality trait test to do, I'll never forget it. It's like this light bulb went off in her head, and she's like, "Oh, so he really is just like that. It's not because he doesn't love me." And their relationship has just flourished once they could get to a point where they could just understand each other. And it's been a miracle, really, when they could, because he was quite high in neuroticism as well. So he was really agreeable, but low in and high neuroticism. So he felt like he was being constantly picked on by her, because she's high in conscientiousness and really disagreeable. So she was there to tell him, "Hey, you've done that wrong, man, and you've done that wrong," and and he's like, stop picking on me, I'm agreeable, I'm trying to be nice to everyone. And it's like, it was a catastrophe in the relationship. But once they managed to work around these things, and that's where it is, the vast majority of my counseling with them has just been to try and to teach them not only to understand each other and to accept each other's way of being as legitimate, but also teach them how to negotiate. And once they can negotiate, we'll pull a little bit more here, we'll push a little bit more there, we'll tweak here, boom, magic. Marriage sorted. And it's an ongoing thing. I mean, you don't just magically overnight, but sorted. And it's been a blessed experience. It really, really has, to be involved in that process. It's been absolutely magic. So yeah, that's neuroticism for you, man. It's unbelievably, this thing, neuroticism, it can wreck you, man. It really, and can cause so much problems. And again, that's where it's so important to understand your personality traits, because it tells you what your biases are as well. So if you know that you are very, very high neuroticism, and someone does something, your immediately reaction is one of victimization. They've done this on purpose in order to hurt me, right? And as soon as you think that, it causes a whole cascade of other negative emotions and negative impressions of that other person, and the disappointment and it's a terrible thing. It really is a terrible thing. But if you realize that you have this tendency, right, then all of a sudden it gives you a moment to step back and be like, hang on, did that person really? Are they really trying to offend me? Are they really trying to oppress me and victimize me? Or am I just being a little bit overly sensitive here? And you can and then it gives you the clarity of mind to maybe go and approach that person and say, listen, this is kind of the impression I'm getting, and can we talk about it? And the person can be like, oh man, I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. And then all of a sudden you've got this way open to negotiate and have a discussion and understand each other. Which then there's peace, then there's peace in the world, where you can have that discussion, and rather than be rather than be, if you're high in neuroticism, doing one of two things, where you will either withdraw, in which case you will get an impression, let's say it's a false impression, but you will withdraw, which means you bury that resentment in you and it festers, and it becomes like a poison in your soul that destroys you, or one day you go completely out of your mind, off your rocker, and shoot everyone in the immediate vicinity. Or if you're high in volatility, you just blow up at the person right there on the spot. And I had a girlfriend once, man, this was unbelievable, where she was so high in neuroticism that and jealousy that it was actually pathological. And you could understand, because her family life just wrecked her family life just wrecked her. So it was understandable. But we were driving along on the freeway, something like like 60 miles an hour or something like that, 120 for those of you in other countries who work on metric system, 60 miles, something like that, 60, 70 miles. And there was this poster. I can't even remember what this poster was for, but the advertising industry, they've discovered that sex sells. So on this poster was some chick in a bikini or whatever stupid thing, and at 70 miles an hour, I'm not joking, this woman, she puts her hand in front of my eyes so that I don't look, half killing us in the process. Well, needless to say, that ended up in a bit of a fight. But that's the volatility. It's like, I'm not going to think about the fact that I could actually kill us here. I'm just going to put my hand in front of my boyfriend's eyes, regardless of whether, I'm focusing on the road, for heaven's sake, And all of it, as I'm driving along, all of a sudden, there's his hand. It's like, what? Are you crazy? You're trying to kill us, woman? It's yeah, man, it's just, you don't want that, right? You just, if you're high in neuroticism, it's something you need to know, and it's something you need to manage. Oh boy, that's funny. Just nearly died in the process, but yeah, it's so you got to try figure that out, man. Try get to understand these things, man. Anyway, I digressed. So what's new? I'm like that, guys. I'm so sorry. Right, then we have, I think this is the final trait. Yes, it is the trait of openness. This trait features characteristics such as imagination and insight, and those high in this trait also tend to have a broad range of interests. People who are high in this trait tend to be more adventurous and creative. People low in this trait are often much more traditional and may struggle with abstract thinking. Right, so this is a trait, openness versus narrow-mindedness, basically. But yeah, narrow-mindedness, it's got a lot more of a negative connotation than actually it's really warranted here. But there's the strong correlation there, unfortunately. So people who are high in openness, in the openness continuum, are typically very creative people, open to trying new things, focused on tackling new challenges, and they're very happy to think about abstract concepts. So, for example, people who are involved in like physics, for example, or philosophy, those tend to be the people that they enjoy abstract reasoning, because anyone who's ever done any philosophy ever, or physics or and things like that, most of that stuff is it's why it's so difficult for so many people to grasp and understand, is because it's so abstract that it's just like, no, what are they even talking about, so for example, I'm very high in openness. I score in the 90th percentile in openness, but I have a high verbal acuity, but and I've got a high spatial acuity, enough to allow me to be a fairly successful engineer, but it's not high enough so that once you start putting the alphabet into mathematics, you've lost me. It's like, what are you doing? As if it wasn't difficult enough already. You now have to add the alphabet too. It's like, are you insane? And then these other funny little Greek symbols. It's like, dude, dude, no, right? But for some other people, hey, that's it. But then some people might be very high in your spatial acuity, so they'll look at a mathematical equation and be like, that makes perfect sense, I've got it. But then are completely incompetent when it comes to philosophy. And actually, a lot of your physicists these days that go out into the world of philosophy and spout absolute rubbish. You get people, I probably shouldn't mention names, but you know exactly who they are, where they are so philosophically incompetent. It's unbelievable, especially those who go along the lines to say philosophy is dead and yet proceed to write a book that is all about philosophy. So if philosophy is dead, then what did you just write, right? And you know exactly who I'm talking about. And it's people like that, brilliant mathematicians, brilliant physicists, but philosophy, they're as layman and stupid with philosophy as I am with their stuff, and as philosophers can be with their stuff. And you do get the odd rare person who's really, really high in both, and it's like, yeah, you want to be those people, but yeah. So also, openness breaks down into two subcategories. Let's do this again. Openness breaks down into subcategories. Yeah, intellect, creativity. Right now, there is a correlation more so with openness, the openness trait than the others, between openness and basic general intelligence, because in order to be creative, you've got to actually be intelligent. And when I talk about creativity, I don't mean like you get some of this modern art where someone will nail a piece of aluminium to a wooden box, that'll sell for like £200,000. It's like, that's not creative, right? Genuine creativity is not something is not only something that is original, but is actually useful, right? And most modern art today is just absolute trash. It's like, no, that's not creative. And there's a general idea amongst people where they're like, well, everyone is creative. That's not true, okay? No, not everyone is. You need to understand something, that if you have a term that can be applied to absolutely everything, then that term is meaningless. If everyone in the world is creative, then no one is actually really creative. It's just, if these words lose an actual distinction in reality, well, then they're meaningless. It doesn't tell you anything to say that someone's creative if every piece of trash that is strung together with superglue is suddenly a creative work of genius. Then you're cheapening actual creativity and actual genius. So, and but we just, in this world, we've just gone completely insane with that sort of thing. So intellect and creativity, and over here again at the subcategories, right? Again, you have the general the divergence between men and women, where men are generally more interested in things and ideas, and women are generally more interested in people and persons and things of that sort, which is why generally, if you have a man and a woman both very, very high in openness, right, very, very high in openness, you'll see that women will generally tend towards the humanities if they're going to go to university, the humanities or the medical world, for example, or psychology and things of that stuff that has to do with people. And men tend to go towards the hard sciences, your engineering, and which it deals with inanimate things, right? And it's just, again, it's, so you have your social justice people. We need more women in the STEM fields, and they're going to drag women in. They're going to drag women into the STEM fields, whether women like it or not. Yay, feminism, right? It's like, it's so ridiculous. It's like, just let people go to wherever they want, man, for heaven's sake. It's like, we want women to be able to make free choices, but they have to do what we say in this regard. It's like, come on, that's not genuine respect for women. Come on, I think you've lost the idea of what respect for women actually means, right? If every single woman on the planet wants to go in one direction, let them. Why are you going to say anything about it, But no, just blame men all the time and forget about the fact that men and women are different and we prefer different things, right? It's like the fact that such a thing even has to be said these days is just so absurd. It's unbelievable. So that's where you have the thing. It's for example, right? Again, you see this difference between men and women, where you go to the home of a bachelor. Bachelor is like he's got a television and a couch and a fridge and a stove to cook on, and that's it. It's like, why do I need anything else, right? But you go to the home of a bachelorette and it's completely different, right? It's decorated, looks nice, and it's like woman make a home. Men build homes. Men build houses. Women make homes. It's that essential difference. How we both take intelligence, both take openness, both require a sound mind and good reasoning and an openness to ideas and things like that. But they're expressed differently. So yeah, that's where you get it. People who are low in the straight. So we go to people who are low in the straight. They dislike change, right? So people who are high in openness, they will travel, and they can be in this country 1 minute and another country the next, and they think it's great. But people who are low in the straight, it's like, no, they don't like traveling as much. For them, they're quite happy to just go home every day and do their thing, and you just leave them alone. Don't interrupt them with newfangled ideas and newfangled things. They don't like it. They do not enjoy new things. They resist new ideas. So again, this is that set in their ways kind of thing. They don't like new ideas. They can be very narrow-minded and frustrating people. And they're not particularly imaginative people. And they dislike abstract or theoretical concepts. So for example, I was actually giving this presentation at an afternoon program at a church once, and I must have been really, really boring, because this one person fell asleep and they slept through half the presentation, right? Or maybe they just don't like new ideas. Who knows? They slept through half the presentation. Actually, I think it was more than that. They slept through most of the presentation and then woke up for like the last 10-15 minutes of it, and then proceeded to declare, no, none of this actually exists. And they went on to give me a nice little soliloquy about how the Bible doesn't teach that. And it's like first you sleep through the entire thing, and then you want to tell me that it doesn't exist. It's like, how about actually being awake, And so that's a very typical example of someone who's low in openness. They know what they know, and that's it. You can't tell them otherwise. And it's frustrating for those of us who are high in openness, but at the same time, it can also be a good thing. Because people who are really, really high in openness, we can go off on a tangent with things. And so people who are low in openness, if expressed properly, you don't want a narrow-minded person who is just recalcitrant all the time. But they can be the brakes in society. It's like, well, hang on, let's chill out a little bit. Maybe we shouldn't just go uprooting everything, just because it seems like a good idea. So there's the legitimate balances between people and stuff like that as well. I know with my wife, she's also very high in openness, but not as much, and she can be like, she's my brakes, my poor woman. I feel sorry for her. Oh, bless her. But she can be the brakes on me for that, and so it's a legitimate thing in life. And here's the interesting thing. One of the reasons why I bring out this personality trait thing, it's because not only do you see it in the world, but you see it in the church as well. Almost all of the arguments in the world revolve around people who are either high in openness or high in conscientiousness. Now, here's the interesting thing. People that are high in conscientiousness typically, so if we look at the political system, high in conscientiousness typically vote conservative, and people who are very high in openness tend to vote liberal. And these two traits seem to be the driving force in a lot of things in the world. And even in the church, there's this constant battle for the soul of what do we change and what do we retain? What do we change? What do we retain? One wants borders, the other one wants to obliterate all the borders. And you see this. I mean, the last election was typical. Let's build a wall. All the conservatives, hey, let's build a wall, right? And all the liberals were like, no, you can't do this. You're terrible people. It's just, once you understand psychology, it's ridiculous. And you, just by looking at openness and conscientiousness, I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe you can predict which way the person is going to vote with about a 75% accuracy. So it really makes you wonder, when we're making decisions, are we really as objective as we think we are, or are we being guided by our temperament? When you're in a church, like for example in my church, in the Seventh-day Adventist church, we're having this big battle over women's ordination. And some people say, yeah, women's ordination, let the woman be whatever. And then the other people are like, no, we can't do that. The Bible says, well, who's right? And it's not self-evident. And if you think it's self-evident, it shows you know nothing about reality. Because nothing is just that self-evident. I mean, some things are, of course, but very, 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 very few things are just that self-evident and that simple, right? Human everything is just so complicated. It's like you as a human being, your brain has got more connections, I believe, you have more connections, neurons in your brain than there are atoms in the universe. Just think about, let that sink in for just about 5 seconds, and then once you finish watching my video, think about it for like another 2 months, and then only then have you maybe meditated on that really enough to just think about that. You are as a human being, you are the single most complicated thing known to mankind, basically. And for us to treat each other and to treat things as if they're just simple and self-evident, and there isn't something more subtle that needs to be talked about, then you're deluded. You're and again, it's one of the reasons why this social rhetoric, this social justice is so reprehensible. It's so reprehensible, and all of this, but we're doing it because we love so and so. I don't buy it for a second, because every single one of these people, they're taking whole groups of people and reducing them down to just one simplistic dimension, and just causing fighting, nothing but fight. It's just ridiculous. Human beings are more subtle than that, and you have to realize, if us as Seventh-day Adventists, if we think the battle between women's ordination or no women's ordination, and those of us who advocate for one side and advocate for another side, we're very convinced that, we've got it right. It's like, are you sure? If I can predict with a 75% accuracy which way you're going to vote, that tells me that maybe we're not being as objective and as rational as we think we're being. And we need to stop taking these things for granted, because it's one thing the Bible actually talks about, where people either lean too far on one way. Old Martin Luther, I think it was, the reformer, made an absolutely brilliant analogy. Human beings are like a drunk peasant on a mule, on a donkey, right? And as a drunk person does, right, they sort of sway from one side to side. And he says, we either fall off on the right into the gutter on the right, or we fall into the gutter on the left. We either go hyper conservative to the point where we are so conservative and so rigid that we actually become oppressive, and we stifle the spirit of the individual, right? Or we fall over into the gutter of the left, where we rip out all of the rules and we just make such an absolute mess out of things that the chaos that ensues itself becomes something that is oppressive and just destroys everything. You uproot all of the structures and the rules that actually make the world work. For example, I mean, you can't think about just a game of Monopoly, right? It's like if there were no rules, you wouldn't have a game in the first place. So you can't just rip out all of the rules. I mean, if you just want to just do whatever you want, well, then what's the point in playing Monopoly? Then you're not playing Monopoly, you're playing something else. And that's what life is like. In life, you have certain things certain rules. You can't do without rules. and the liberal just rip everything up. And this is the battle between the two. And you see this in the Bible. You see this in the Bible. Something Jesus said to the Jewish, to the Pharisees at the point where he says, you have a very fine way of doing away with the law of God just to observe your own traditions. So you can get rid of all these. It's like they were so liberal with getting rid of one thing, only through, out the front door to get rid of the law of God, only through the back door to bring other laws which were actually even more oppressive. And you see that these days with the way social justice has gone totally insane. It's like all they do is increase laws and increase the power of the state to the point where society just becomes even more oppressive than what we started out with. It's just, and we don't see it. But anyway, hopefully this will help. And I'm going to refer to these. So pay attention, learn it, go and read the stuff that I'm going to put the links in the description below. Read the stuff, get familiar with it, because I'm going to refer back to this because they're so useful. I cannot even begin to tell you. And we're going to come back to it. And you see this wrestling of people's temperament, even in the Bible. That's why the stories are there. It's real stories about real people battling through these kinds of things. And how do we find the balance? The Bible's it's a book on how to live with each other and about other stuff, but in this psychological regard. And this is what I want to do with this as a preface. Discuss other psychological and sociological implications of the biblical stories and what it tells us about how to be with each other, how to be with on the vertical, on the horizontal, the horizontal, on the vertical. Dyslexic there, aren't I? Speed of the Sunday. Right? How to be. I shouldn't have done that, should I? How to deal with each other, not only on the horizontal plane, man, woman, each other, our relationships, but then how to deal with each other on a vertical plane in structures of authority. It's essentially the male and female archetypal things. Is like women generally represent, especially, and in the Bible, we'll bring this out later, your mother teaches you, is the archetype for your relationships in the horizontal plane, how you deal with each other, which is why in the old days, moms used to say, if you want to know how your man is going to treat you, go and see what his relationship with his mother is like, and then you know how he's going to treat you in your marriage. That's why that's there, right? Just like don't marry a man who's got a dysfunctional relationship with his mother. Well, I mean, I'm not saying that this is strict rule, but if you see that a man's got a dysfunctional relationship with his mother, that's your first clue. That's your first clue that you might run into problems later, right? And so you see that. So your woman and your mothers, they will teach you how to have a healthy relationship on the horizontal plane, how we deal with each other. And then having a father, a healthy relationship with your father, will determine how, when you grow up, what kind of a relationship you are going to have with structures of authority, right? Which is why young men who grow up in houses without their fathers tend to become criminal, right? They have a problem with authority. They become criminal. They flaunt the law. And the research now is starting to come out where there was this mantra that said, woman, everything that men can do, women can also do, and they can do better. That's such a retarded statement. It's unbelievable. It's just so stupid. It's so ignorant. It's unbelievable. That's false. Absolutely false. And our children are paying the price for it now, right? So you have the horizontal plane with the feminine teaches you how to deal with each other, and the man in the psychological archetypes of when we're raising children. If the children have a dysfunctional relationship with their father, they are going to have a dysfunctional relationship with society and the various authorities in society. And that's just and that is just bearing its way out like it's unbelievable. It's why the Bible says certain things about how men should be in authority, and you need a man in your life, you need a good father in your life, and you need a good mother. You can't get rid of any one of them. And people have tried to do that. And so you can't do it. You can't do it. Men and women cannot do what the other does. And if you believe that, if you really, really believe that a man can do everything a woman can do, and a woman can do everything a man, then the only thing that tells me is that you've completely trivialized what it means to be a man, and you've completely trivialized what it means to be a woman, and you've completely misunderstood what both are there for. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for indulging me. I hope that this information is useful, and if you enjoyed this and you find it helpful, please do us a favor, subscribe to get some more interesting stuff. And I thank you all very much. Cheers for joining me. God bless.